Hello and welcome back to the second episode of TikToks. I am one of your hosts, Dr. Caitlin Baker, aka That Fat Doctor. And this is
I am the other host, aka That Black Doctor, even though I didn't give you the first name, so it's weird to pronounce it in that order, but I'm Dr. TiktToks.
Yeah, so if you watched our last episode, we talked about self-love and self-hate. And our viewing party for that is in a couple hours, and I'm really excited about it. So today we're gonna switch it up, and we're gonna talk about toxicity in relationships and boundaries, and how to set boundaries with toxic people. So T, I'm gonna let you start this out. Where are we going? Let's just go.
Well, first things first, what's toxic? You hear that all the time, and that's not just a Britney Spears song, which is a really great song, by the way. But toxicity is basically anything that just brings you down. It gets in your head, it gets in your heart, it gets in your body, it gets in your soul. Like, it just brings you down to being around those people. And I've been around a lot of those people. And maybe it's a little bit different in terms of the specifics for whoever's going through it. But for me, the idea of having a toxic person or a toxic family, it's insanely relevant. And I've been in a relationship, well, multiple relationships where the entire family was toxic. Everything they say and do is just negative. Anytime you are having a conversation with them, you feel worse because you were in that conversation. It's just one of those things where no matter what happens, you feel like you want to get out of it. And that's just kind of how I define it. What are your thoughts?
No, I agree. I think that, like, people think toxic and they think manipulation, they think abuse, but they don't think about, like, the subtleties that can be toxic, and that's like being around people that are constantly negative or making little microaggressions, which are little kind of passive comments that I like the hit and runs. Like, they hit and then it sinks in, and then that person just walks away like nothing ever happened. But I do think that, like, toxicity is more relevant than most people think when it comes to people in their everyday lives. And not saying that everybody in your life is toxic.
Mm-hmm.
And
Although it could be.
I mean, it is possible. It's I mean, I've had my fair share of dealing with people that I would rather have not dealt with in my personal life.
Mm-hmm. Like everyone from the place we met. Yeah.
Yeah, the place where T and I met was there was some toxicity up in there. And again, that's going to be an episode for another day about that place. But yeah, I mean, I think of toxic, I think of people who are trying to push my boundaries, get something from me, taking advantage of me and my kindness. And someone says jump and I say, how high can I help you? So I think that for me, that's what toxic has shown up in my life mostly, is that. And it's, again, just negativity surrounding me and, like, hopelessness a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So
from working with clients and also just in personal experiences, the most toxic thing I see is these, like, little narcissistic traits. Like, it wouldn't be like a full diagnosis for a lot of these people, but these things where clearly it's you and it's not me. And, like, okay, well, maybe it's a little bit you, and, like, nope, it's you. And you're like, what is happening right now? Well, one of my favorite experiences is, with all humility, like, an attempt, I'm trying to speak to this person. I'll try not to even give, like, gender so it doesn't, like, give it away. But I'm trying to speak to this person, and they're telling me how I'm not a good friend, which is, like, one of my, like, number one, like, triggers. Like, I am a good friend. Excuse me. I'm not a good friend. How I'm just not available when they need me to be. And I'm saying, I've answered every text. I've always been a phone call away. I reach out to you more than you've ever reached out to me. I can understand, it's not true in my opinion, but I can understand why you feel like I'm not a good friend. but let's talk about this. Mind you, I'm the one that brought up. I feel like it's not really going that well.
Mhm.
So, anyway, I'm the bad person. And by the end of this conversation, I realize I don't want to be a good friend to you. I shouldn't have even like done this, but
Right.
it was my feeling like I need to be the person that brings things up because you're not that person.
Yeah.
And it just became this conversation of no, you need to just admit you're a bad friend. It's like, okay, and then what? Then what happens from there? I just
What
accept
does
I'm a
happen?
bad friend, and then I'm supposed to be better after you making me do that. So yeah, that was kind of the most recent thing that's happened. And I was
Mm.
like, I wish I could just show you like a screenshot of our friendship over time and you just be like, here, prove it.
I bet. I bet that's a good example. I
Yeah.
think I mean, personally, I've been called toxic, which I think is going to come as quite a shock to many people. But I have boundaries and I enforce those boundaries. And when someone wants to cross over those boundaries that I have established, and I do not let them, then I get called all kinds of nice names. But my boundaries are what keeps me sane. I don't like saying that, but it's true.
Mhm.
I need them to like I'm trying to think of a good example of a boundary that I have. And it just depends. Like if I don't want to go somewhere, I'm not gonna let you guilt me into feeling like I should have to go. Because you all know that I have some chronic illnesses, including lupus, and some days like my body's just like, no, fam, like we're not going anywhere today.
Mhm.
And if I were to tell that to, say, one of my family members, they would get quite angry with that because they also have chronic illnesses and they kind of are like, just push through it. Which, like, I understand that might work for you,
Mhm.
but when I have pain, I have pain. Like, I got a 12-hour tattoo, fell asleep during it because it didn't hurt. So when I say I'm in pain, I am in some mother freaking pain.
Mhm.
That's one of my really hard boundaries is just like respect my ability to say no.
And
Um,
I've noticed that kind of concept with a lot of people is you think you know what someone else is going through, but you never do. It doesn't matter if it's the exact same scenario, you're a different person with different experiences.
right,
Like I have tattoos doesn't mean it's an easy thing to do. For me it was easy. Doesn't mean it's easy for everyone.
right.
The same thing with everything else, whether it's an addiction, whether it's a relationship, whether it's anything in the world. You don't know someone else's experience and you need to respect the way they set their boundaries.
Yes.
And a lot of people just don't do that.
And I'm giving you permission, Dr. Caitlin, right now. I give you permission to cut out toxic people in your life. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to cut off relationships. I know one of the biggest thing in my family, my dad has always said, all we have is each other. I have two sisters. All you girls have is each other. Um, but if one of them was toxic and was really bringing me down, like, I don't care that they're family because that's my well-being and it would impede my ability to help others if I wasn't feeling as well due to someone else's actions. So you can cut off family members. You are allowed. You're allowed to get rid of people in your life who are not supporting you and who bring you down. And I know it's a lot easier said than done. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, a lot easier said than done. But I'm just saying, even if you have that thought in your head of like, I could walk away if I really wanted to, can be empowering enough sometimes.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of people think that the toxic piece is just like, oh, I have this friend, which a lot of times it is, but sometimes toxic chooses you. You're born into it. And then other times you're way too far in to realize how toxic your situation is. And then you're like, oh no, I should have seen all of these flags a long time ago.
Yeah.
I
And
have
like
friends
I
that
like
have,
I think every person does have some toxic traits. Like there's no such thing as like someone who's like I got my microphone. I have toxic traits. One of them is being
clumsy.
intimidated. No. I really do. I'm honestly, I cannot get my shit together. I'm a really messy person. like I am, people assume that I'm like super neat and together, and that is not true.
I've seen your
My house is a mess, but it's not like dirty. It's like clothes everywhere because I like clothes. But so I was just an example. Like toxicity is literally in everyone. And last episode, I think that we actually touched on how, you know, being self-love and self-confidence does not equal I don't have any toxic traits.
Mm-hmm.
It equals I can see my toxic traits and I can work on them and become better. So that's the other thing about this is like toxicity is not point blank, oh, you're toxic, bye. It's okay, let me notice these things about myself. Let me notice that, you know, maybe this isn't such a great thing that I do, or maybe this coping skill is hurtful to others, or whatever it may be, and just say like, okay, well, let's fix that. It doesn't mean I'm a bad person. Let's fix it. Everybody has toxic traits.
Right.
They're yours.
So in line with setting boundaries, you should also be open to hearing about your toxicity and your toxic traits, and then actively work on them. See where they come from, understand why you're doing these things, and replace them with something that's healthier. And that's going to be a huge weight off your shoulders to get that out of there. And everyone else is going to be happier because of it.
And if I could just plug my merch real quick, go the fuck to therapy. Honestly, going to therapy, identifying your toxic traits, addressing them, processing them, like T said, figuring out where they're coming from, why it's happening, figure out something to replace the behavior with. Go to therapy. My dog's barking. This is a hot mess. I don't even care. Let's talk about how to set boundaries and when to set boundaries.
Okay.
That was my intro.
Oh. Clearly wasn't prepared. All right. So, yeah, I think setting boundaries is really multifaceted, and it's extremely difficult to explain in the amount of time that we're going to be doing this podcast. But we can start with some basics. For me, the number one is time. I value time more than anything else. I think my time is extremely important. I think other people's time is extremely important. So I always make sure I'm doing my best to consider that. So an example of this is I have a do not disturb set for my phone.
I'm laughing because
You don't.
I overslept the other day on tea. So he's talking about stealing time, and I'm over here like, yeah, I've stolen your time a few times.
Whoops.
Okay, sorry. Continue.
So that's the thing. Like, I set alarms, I plan ahead, and that's just what I do because I value it so much. So if I need to be somewhere, I would rather be 30 minutes early than 5 minutes late. It's all about time for me. Same thing with clients. I work between this time and that time. If you need to contact me here and it's an emergency, you're not supposed to be talking to me anyway. Call, the right authorities. If it's something you just want to talk about in general, cool. Set up an appointment. Like, that's what's important.
Yeah.
It's for my mental health and it's for your sanity too. If you have someone that you can constantly reach at all times, you're not using your own coping skills. You're not using your own ability to rate whether or not it's actually an emergency or not. You're just, you're just relying on others. And that's also a form of toxicity if it gets to a certain point.
Yeah. So, I mean, you just kind of touched on therapeutic boundaries, right? So in therapy, therapists are like, we have to have hard boundaries in place for clients because clients will, and it may not be ill-willed. It could just like they're just trying to get to know us, but they ask questions. They ask.
We're emotional hookers.
Yeah, they push, and there has to be that. And the entirety of therapy is a mind game in a way of we try to stay one step ahead in some ways of like. In my head, at least, it's like, okay, what I just said could have this or this response from this person. Which one do I think it's going to be? And then what will my response? It's a game, but, the boundaries piece is part of playing that game and reflecting it and saying like, well, I'm curious why you're asking that question about me. Would it be important for you to know that about me? Or what's the therapeutic value in this? So therapists get real good at playing that. Let's turn this back on you.
Mhm.
Because it's true, if you're asking those questions, I mean, of course you want to know your therapist, but I think that those things kind of get found out organically. And if you're asking up front, it typically is something else going on underneath that you're actually curious about. So, and the whole dynamic, of course, of psychotherapy is that the therapist is supposed to be, in psychodynamic theory, kind of like a blank slate where the client is able to project all of their
Your
thoughts. And
thoughts, feelings,
yeah,
emotions. Yeah.
because you're just supposed to be like an inanimate object, basically. So when
That's
people know
classical.
things about you, you're no longer an inanimate object.
Yeah.
So it gets complicated with therapy and boundaries, but those boundaries are important. It's important to have boundaries with your therapist, or for them to have boundaries with you, more likely.
And then also, that's way more stories. Um, and then there's also the piece of you setting those boundaries for yourself in the rest of the world. So I just use the example of time, but it can be other things as well. So let's talk about other boundaries that you've like set for yourself where you felt like it needed to be this way. You kind of mentioned earlier, there's this idea that you don't want to be pushed to do something if you're not like physically ready. Is there anything else?
Yeah, it's more of the guilt that people associate. They're like someone will call me and they'll be like, "What are you doing right now?" And I'm gonna, "Nothing. Let's hang out." No.
No.
Well, why? You just said you're not doing anything. Because doing nothing is my plans.
It's a great.
So that's one of my hard ones. What other boundaries do I set? It's hard to just like come up with boundaries on the spot because it's just one of those.
No, that's what makes it so fun.
Yeah. For you. So
Yeah. For me,
okay, I do set, so like with TikTok, I do set boundaries. Because I legally and ethically, there are messages that I cannot respond to, or that people are, I get a lot of messages, and I get a lot of wild messages, and they're basically a lot of kids saying anything they can to get my attention, to get a response from me. And at first it really pulled on my heartstrings because that's just who I am as a person. Like, I want to help everybody, and I know that my response, like just something as simple as me writing a couple words, would make someone's whole day. But I had to stop doing that because I realized I was spending hours and hours and hours on TikTok responding to messages. So now I'm a little bit more choosy about which messages I respond to, not like, I don't like the content of the message. Like if someone's thanking me, I'd be sure to like, say you're welcome, thanks for supporting me. If someone's wanting therapy advice, I can't give you therapy advice. Not one-on-one, not individually. It just, I can do it, when I'm on lives and you ask general questions, I can do that, but I can't do very specific stuff. I can provide resources if you need help, or if there's an emergency, I can say like, call 911. So I've had to be careful with boundaries that I set, even on TikTok, and doing what I do. So just another example of boundaries come in all shapes and sizes, and you can set them for literally anything that you want.
I would say one of the most important things is to set it for self-care, because people forget that all the time. It's like, I need to go to work and do these hours. I need to take extra for overtime. I need to make sure that I'm focusing so much on my grades at school. Like, yeah, all of those things are important. But when you're retired, when you're graduating, you're not going to think of, I'm so glad I spent another 10 hours like studying that week. You're going to be like, I wish I spent more time with my friends.
Welcome back. We yet again had technical difficulties, but I think we figured it out, because I think I'm just stupid and don't know how to work my computer, but we got it. So we back.
We done did it. All right.
And T was in the middle of a rant, and then we forgot what it was, and then we had to go look again. So here we go.
I don't call it a rant, but let's go. So anyway, it's really important to engage in self-care and to realize how important that is. Because yes, you need to focus on work and you need to put in the hours. Yes, you need to focus on school and you need to study and you need to get good grades. All important things. But when it's all over and done with, when you graduated, when you're retired, when you're trying to spend time with the family, with the close friends, you're not going to remember and be thankful for all the times you put in the hours to study. You're not
Right.
going to be super thankful for all the time that you just went to work, went to overtime. You'll be thankful for what you did because of that as a result. So, did you spend more time with your family? Did you get to see your loved ones? Did you create great memories? And if you don't, that ends up being your greatest regrets. And you can look that up. That's research. It's just what it is.
Well, look at
How are you?
Erickson's theory of development. What's his last stage? Is what, contemplation, or you're either look back at your life and you're happy with what you did, or you have regrets about what you did and wish that you had spent more time with family. So that's literally, one of the founding fathers of psychology. One of his principles of development is that you reach that age, and once you're older, you do look back on your life and you think, do I wish I had spent more time at the office? I don't think anybody would ever say that. I think that they would say, I wish that I spent more time with my family or my friends, or I wish I traveled or did this, or so yeah, just interesting that everything's tied together in psychology, apparently, literally everything.
And I'm fortunate enough to say that I've lived my life that way. Like, I've traveled all around the world. I've traveled all around the United States.
Yeah.
Comes at a great price for sure, but I'll always have those memories, and I'll always have those stories, and I'll always be able to tell people that I've done all of these things, and it's in here.
Traveling has become like part of your identity. Like, that's something that I know about you and that you're very passionate about and proud of. And yeah, I think that that's great. And I think that our listeners would love to hear more about your adventures later on other episodes. But I think it comes down to what you want your life to look like. If you want to be unhappy and have the same people in your life that are maybe causing some of the unhappiness, and you are having a difficult time with setting those boundaries and releasing that, then that's your choice. But you also have the choice of stepping up, saying, I'm not going to let you treat me this way. This is what I want my life to look like, and this is what I'm going to do to get it to look that way. And you can do it. A lot easier said than done, obviously. But
yeah. All right.
So
I think that's a great way to wrap up today's episode.
This episode has lasted like 3 hours because we can't get our shit together. So I hope that helps. I know that like there's so much more we could talk about with boundaries and, using specific examples and maybe specific examples of how to cut out toxic people, or even more personal.
If you're watching on YouTube, hit the like, subscribe, click that notification bell, all the stuff.
New episodes drop every Sunday. They will be less chaotic than this one.
We can only dream.
So yeah, like and subscribe. New episodes every Sunday, and remember that you are loved and beautiful and kind and good, and everything does get better eventually. Love you all. Thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you next week. Peace out, Girl Scouts.